Being recorded. All right.
Here we go.
Call the meeting to order at 6:05, and I apologize, but our power did go out. We got it back on about 2 minutes before this meeting went. So thanks for that, everybody. Okay, so we have a quorum, and I did hear from Jesse. He's unable to join us tonight. But thank you, everybody else, for being here. So we've got minutes from the 17th. May 17th to approve, and I thank Patrick for running the meeting for me on that date.
You're welcome.
Comments, corrections to the minutes? If not, do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Ike, seconded by
I'll second.
Patrick.
Hello, Scott.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, new business. I just wanted to report that that I did give an update to the Town Council Subcommittee Admin and Education last Monday on the 5th. And that went well. Told them where we're at with everything. So everybody's excited we're out to bid. Nothing else really to say about that. And Nancy, anything else on that meeting? I think that was they were pleased with where we're
We're
at.
very happy that we're on track for going out to bid and looking forward to hitting our milestones.
All right, so let's go to TSKP. Deanna, welcome.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So for us really to update is that we have been working with Downs on this bidding process. We have issued 3 supplements from the design team. We are reviewing RFI questions that are coming from the bidders. Probably Downs can update on dates, coming milestones, as you said.
Questions for Deanna?
Deanna, I have one question.
Go ahead.
Since we are apparently not going to get either grant, I assume that we are still going ahead to qualify for LEED Silver. We haven't changed that goal.
That's correct. That's
That
correct.
hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Other questions for Deanna? All right. Well, thanks. I know this is a hard time going through bidding with all the changes on the fly with comments from the building inspector, questions from bidders. So thanks for all that work. So let's go on to our Downs team. Who's here? We've got, I see Anthony's here, Scott's here.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Thank you, Mark.
And Tom's here too. Sorry about
Tom's
that.
here too, yep. All right, so we're deep in the trenches with being out to bid for both projects. As Deanna mentioned, there's 3 supplementals that have been forwarded to Downs. We're currently reviewing the 3rd supplemental, and we put out an addendum, addendum 4 last Friday, just to push everyone out a little bit so we could have time to review supplemental 3 that we just received yesterday, which has code updates, has now the transformer location for Prosser for the new service on the civil drawings. So we can see some grading changes and some coordination that has to happen on those drawings. And as Deanna mentioned, we're going through a slew of RFI responses that we are adding to the addendum. So at the moment, we have a certain amount of bid packages that will be due next Wednesday, on the 21st. And then we have the balance of the bid packages who are going to need a little more time to absorb the changes that occurred in supplemental number 3 that hopefully we'll get out for tomorrow. We're still reviewing it for June 27th. Okay. And that will be addendum 5. So addendum 4 was just a notice out to the subs, pushing the dates out a little bit. So we had some time to soak in supplemental number 3, which we're currently going through. We we seem to have coverage on all our packages, and bidding is going well. A lot of the trades are very engaged into the bid and into the drawings with their questions, and their good questions, and it's good to see. The process is going well. And that's what I have for an update for today, Mark.
Okay, questions for Scott and company? I don't see any hands. I did want to comment that, the supply chain issues. I think we all know that supply chain issues have been possible ever since the beginning of this project, going through COVID and all that. And, but I think the electrical service was particularly tricky because we probably, and I need your help to clarify this, Scott. But
Sure.
My understanding is that we really couldn't have known about the lead time on all that we need to purchase until it reached a pretty serious level of design. Rather than trying to focus on that early in the job, it didn't happen until a lot later. And I just want to make it clear to everybody that, you guys were aware of all these things, but some of these decisions couldn't be made till later on in the game. I don't know if you have anything to expand on that.
You mean with the original switchgear and as far as trying to pre-purchase the original switchgear?
Yeah. Well, I know you tried to pre-purchase, but even that decision couldn't be made on day one.
Well,
until it all got sized and designed. So
yeah, right. We were still in the design process. Was there a possibility to be able to pre-purchase it? Absolutely. Unfortunately, the grant process kind of stymied that a bit from occurring for kind of a pre-purchase type of agreement, as you're aware, with the library grants. But what came out of that is, everyone reviewing the fact that, okay, we're not going to be able to pre-purchase the switchgear, but what can we do? What if we change the system, right? Like we talked about and eventually did do with both projects, first McMahon and then with Prosser. And by changing that, which seems to be a bit of a trend that's going on as of late, to a panelized system versus a true switchgear, that's helping with the lead time immensely, where, we can't pre-purchase it, but at least we can go through somewhat of a normal process in a construction project with gaining panels and power equipment. So that's been very helpful. And, what we've also learned too is, roofing is much better. Now you can get roofing materials, you can get roofing insulation. Unfortunately, it's more money. And as a lot of things are right now, and particularly curtain wall, but you can get the materials, which is really good. You don't have to worry about putting on a temporary roof while you're waiting for all your roofing insulation to come in. So even though there's some challenges and hurdles, I think we've come a long way from the start of COVID and the year after COVID from where we are today in construction. Are things a little more expensive? Yes, but are there opportunities to find different ways to get equipment, particularly with electrical? Absolutely. And are we taking advantage of that? Yes, we are.
all right. Well, thanks everybody for exploring all that and finding solutions. All right. I don't see any hands up for questions for you guys, so let's go to Chip.
Good evening, everybody.
Sorry, Mark, Chip, before you start, I just thought of one thing, Scott. So when the bids do start coming in, how are you going to be recording the costs? Like, are you just using a spreadsheet or?
Yeah, we're using what we call the bid tabulation. And you'll see all the bidders on one side.
Okay.
The spreadsheet, and then you'll see the cost next to it and ultimately where the low cost is. And you're going to see some crazy combo bid combinations, in particular with both projects. So we're probably gonna have to do one big bid tab that shows both jobs.
Okay.
I'm still mulling that over how to present it.
So will we also see like the estimated cost for each of those addendums?
Oh, yeah, you'll see
Okay.
budgets. Yeah, what the budgets are. Yep, we have.
No, but
those.
I mean, let me state that again. Will we see what we originally estimated for each, that
Yes.
each of those should cost?
Yeah, so the estimated cost equals budget.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah, you betcha, you will. And we, once that form is done and set, after our scope reviews, no matter what happens, that has to go to DECD. And they need a copy of that, among a few other things.
Okay,
All right,
thank
So
you for that.
the last bids are coming in, what'd you say, on the
27th.
27th? Our
Mhm.
next meeting is the
28.
8th. You're gonna pull an all-nighter for us there?
You may have to give us a minute, but yeah, we'll you know,
Because
we
you
do
know
have
we're
that
gonna
bid
wanna
tab out.
know.
Yeah, we do have that bid tab out when we're reading. I think it's the combo numbers that might slow us down, depending how crazy that gets. But yeah, we'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and I realize it'll be your first, first run through the whole thing until you vet everybody and
Yeah.
it's real, but
Well, if it goes smoothly for next week, then that will be our first run to get it, to get it tabulated. So maybe the second. run
let's
smoothly.
put it this way. I'm hoping to see something on the 28th that,
Yeah, I bet you are. I am too. Believe me.
everybody is. Everybody is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, you will.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Chip.
We ready for Chip now? Chip, you're up.
All right, good evening. Well, the biggest news for my update is that we do have the signed lease at the MetLife building. So we've begun the move process in earnest. The library folks have had a couple of meetings with the moving company and are continuing along with that and really starting to plan all the steps with the move. So that's the biggest thing. Next, also, I'm working on the materials testing agent, which will be kind of the next consultant that we will need to hire, and we'll be doing so off of the state contract. So it's a relatively easy process. I received the statement of special education, and I'm going through trying to come up with an estimate as to what those costs are likely to be. So that's really what's going on right now.
Congratulations on the lease. And thanks for all that hard work. It's taken a long time. Questions for Chip? Okay. Lois.
Chip, can you, what is the materials reference and the special education reference? I just don't know the lingo.
Oh, no, materials testing agent is the laboratory that will be testing things like concrete, making sure that the concrete mixes are as designed, that the rebar is the right location. They'll be looking at soils and the types of soils, making sure that it meets the specifications, compaction, kind of all, steel, all of those kinds of tests. And the statement of special special inspections
There you go.
is a document that's put out by the engineer to identify what needs to be tested. And all of that will then be, will be reviewed. The results will be reviewed by Downs, by TKSP, by me, and ultimately the building inspector usually wants to see those reports as well.
So none of this has to do with the MetLife building.
Right, that's correct.
Thank you. I was a little confused.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
It's all new construction. Those special inspections are structural related. And I believe that all came about after the little history, the L'Ambiance Plaza collapse in Bridgeport back in the 90s, I want to say. All the codes changed a lot about inspecting the work in process rather than just relying on a set of drawings. So that's what that's all about. Other questions? All right, thanks, Chip.
Yep.
Let's see, anything from our outreach committee?
Yes, I have some
Awesome.
updates. Yep. So the outreach committee met on June 1st, and we went over some of our public communications, which we have updated. And I just want to share my screen and show you the advertisement that ran in the messenger this past Friday. You can see that it says new library buildings coming. So this is what appeared in the messenger. So it has information about the buildings closing on June 30th, and then our temporary locations, information about that. We plan to open the temporary location at 330 Park Avenue at the Human Services Building in July, and the MetLife Building on the Cigna campus in August. And during the month of June, we're having a Load a Tote campaign to encourage patrons to take out a lot of materials, and they can keep them all summer. And this is actually perfect for our summer reading program, which we just launched on June 5th. The library has visited the schools to talk about summer reading. And we even had some school classes visit the library this week, and the kids were so excited. You could just hear them throughout the whole library loading their totes. They went crazy loading their totes with materials. We were so happy to see them take so many of the books for the summer. So that kind of goes hand in hand. We wanted to thank the Friends of the Library for funding our summer reading program. We're also updating the digital signs in town and keeping our BPL is moving document that can be found on the library's homepage on our website. We're keeping that updated with the best information we have up till now. And so we appreciate everyone on the building committee continuing to help us spread the word about our transitions that are happening, and leading the public to our website and that transition document. We give them the most updated information we have as of right now.
Great, thanks, Allison. I was reminded when you went through that the town council subcommittee understood and was very happy about the fact that the swing space is on a bus route. But they were hopeful that you guys at the library would help patrons understand how to do that ride from one place to another. And even if possible, I don't know, have any idea if it's possible, talk to the bus company about if there was a need to simplify the routes. I don't know if there's any transfers or if it's crazy how you get from Blue Hills Avenue, to the swing space, but if necessary, you may want to reach out to the bus company and just understand what is happening to patrons to get from one place to another.
Yeah, Chris actually has more information about that. So
yeah, actually, I was
right now, yeah.
for the committee.
Chris.
But since you mentioned it, Mark,
Okay.
we did look into that, especially from Blue Hills, and it's actually pretty good. It's only a 20-minute trip. It's only a couple stops from Blue Hills up to MetLife. It starts as early as 6 in the morning, which of course we're not open yet, and it ends around 6 at night. So I think it'll work pretty well, and it's a pretty straight shot. There's only, I think it's the 50A bus, and it runs I think it only has about 5 or 6 stops, and MetLife is one of them directly. It goes right in front. So we want to thank Councilor McClary for inquiring about that, but we're confident people will be able to easily get from Blue Hills to MetLife. I'm still looking at Tunxus and trying to put that together, but definitely from Blue Hills.
Great, thanks, Chris. I see any other hands, questions for Chris or Allison? All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Let's go to Leah, anything technology-wise?
Not right now, no.
Okay, I think we're good. On
Yeah.
that. Yeah, well, until we get our budget, right? And then we'll have to pick and choose. All right, so Nancy, purchases,
No purchases.
but we have invoices, right?
We have lots of invoices.
Any invoices. All right, let's pay everybody.
Okay, the first one is for Colliers. It's invoice number 833-652 for services through March for $7,360.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Patrick.
Patrick. Thank you. Okay, I'll find it. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Mhm.
Okay, motion passes.
Next, we have another invoice from Colliers. This is invoice 843627, services through April. And this is in the amount of $3,040.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by Lois. Thank you very much. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you. Next,
Next is TSKP Studio, invoice number 220103-15. Services for McMahon through May 31st in the amount of $4,000.
moved by Bob Ike, seconded by Chris Grant. Thank you, Chris. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes.
Next is TSKP Studio, invoice 200802-18. This is for processor services through May of 23 for $12,000.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Second.
Patrick. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes.
Next, we have Van Zelm Engineers, invoice number 0050749. And this is for services through May for $2,268.
Moved by Bob
Second.
Ike, second by
Lois.
Lois.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
This is our commissioning agent.
Marcia,
Yes.
you get the next one.
What's that?
Nothing.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you.
Next, we have SLR invoice 183427 for traffic engineering services for $1,725.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Second.
Patrick. Thank you. Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you.
We have, the last one is also SLR for this is invoice 184982. This is also for traffic engineering, and this one is in the amount of $246.30.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Second.
Lois. Thank you very much. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes.
That's it.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everybody. Next meeting, as I said before, is end of the month on the 28th. Hopefully, we're gonna have some good and significant news on our bids. Everybody think positive thoughts. And then we're into July 12th. All right, comments from the committee. Any hands? Comments from the committee? Going once, going twice. All right, public comments. Nancy, anybody with their hand up?
Anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Yes, we have Salvatore D. Dominicus. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but go ahead and speak. Unmute yourself and you can speak.
You know, I saw a hand and it disappeared.
It's Mr. Dominicus. He's,
Yeah, D. Dominicus.
I promoted him. He should be able to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There we go. Oh, no.
Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yes, we
Okay.
There
can.
we go. There we
Okay,
go.
Thank you. I missed quite a few meetings. The only question I would have is, with the bidding process, are the two libraries bid as one project or they bid as separate?
I'd be happy to answer that now. We don't normally answer questions, but I'm happy to clarify that. They're being bid at the same time as separate projects, but the contractors do have the option of combining them together and offer us some cost savings. So that's what the construction manager is going to be sorting through, the combination.
Okay, when they do that, you have, let's say, bid one buys in, bid two is McMahon, and then you have something in between. How do they bid that? Wouldn't it have to be a separate bid process or bid calculation?
I'm not sure what your question is. How does who do what?
In other words, you have two libraries that bid as separate projects. And you're saying, say, for instance, electrical contractor can bid one or two of them. How does he put that in the bid?
They're asked to provide a price. They're asked to provide a price if they're doing both.
Yeah, the bid forms are laid out to make that easy for the bidders.
And I suggest maybe you, if you have time to come back on the 28th, maybe Downs can go through that.
Okay, I typically when you bid two separate buildings, there are two separate bids. And now you're putting an option for the contractor to bid both. So that to me is a total separate bid.
Well, it is a third line item, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that's covered in the description of the bids.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
All
got it.
to the advantage of the town.
Hopefully, yes.
Right.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other?
Anyone else from the public? Can raise your virtual hand. We have no one else but their hand raised.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Chris.
Chris. Thanks, Chris. Nice to see you, Chris. All right. All in
Nice to
favor of
see you.
adjourning,
Mhm.
please
Aye.
wave goodbye.
Aye.
And motion passes. So thank you, everybody. Look forward to the next meeting. Big meeting coming up.
Yeah, good job, everybody.